Good evening and welcome once again, my friends, my fellow Americans. And we are once again glad to greet you and welcome you to the Leo and Larry Show, the show that tells you the things you need to know and the places where you need to go. And as always, we have fantastic guests. And thank you so much for, as our guests come on and we get all this positive feedback from you and how much you're learning. And today we have another awesome guest, Flo McAfee. She's the principal owner of Summerland Studios, which is a strategic planning communications firm that works with environmental justice, climate issues. They work with all sorts of organizations, social justice issues, etc. And so, welcome right now at this time, Flo McAfee of Summerland Studios. Thank you, Flo McAfee, for agreeing to come on the program. And why don't you tell folks how you got to this place and time in your life's journey?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited about sharing some of my curiosity and thoughts with you all today. And it's kind of funny how I got to this situation right now and how we met. It was through work with environmental and climate justice that I do. And that's just a series of all sorts of work that I do wrapped around communications. It's both communications that's touched with, I say, a multicultural touch on it because I look at one of the things about me is I grew up living all over the world. I was an army brat. My father was in the military, and so we traveled the world. And my mother is very curious, and she put us out there to learn, see, and do everything. But most of all, I guess the underlining thing we got from both of our parents was a sense of social justice, service. My mother was a young activist, very, very young when my dad was at the University of Illinois, who would sit in and boycott. But I grew up thinking, oh, I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to learn French. I'm going to go live in Paris, and I'm not going to do anything political. I'm not going to do well. That it didn't end up that way. That's what I ended up immediately jumping into a campaign, and I guess I haven't stopped since. But it's not a straight line. I learned about communications, and so I kind of paved my own path in the whole strategic communications field because I felt that a lot of people have messages and a lot of people have ways that they want to get it out, but they need help on doing it. So I've worked in every arena in communications from in New York when I lived. I worked on Broadway plays to people helping them publicize their books to just every sort of field. And I've been in the area with environmental and climate justice probably about 7 years now, because when I
Mm-hmm.
got in it, I had a very good sense of it, and I've always appreciated, because my grandparents, one lived in Mississippi and Texas, the land, one, the ancestors of farmers, so there was a sense of not only nature, but the impact and the relationship with the land, especially my grandmother, who was a very spiritual individual. So, but I had never done environmental communications, but I learned it really quick
Mm-hmm.
because it's so interconnected with so many, it has connected with health. I have done health issues. So that's how I eased into it. And that is actually how I met you all and started doing, helping with New Alpha and some of the good work that way. So that's kind of a short, quick way of
Mm-hmm.
how I got into the field, um,
Yeah.
and and, um, and enjoy it, and still doing public service, but in a creative way. I look for it because, in these times, especially now, when you look at some of the environmental issues, the impact on people's health on one hand, or if you turn around and look the other way and look at the political world, it seems very chaotic. So how does one get inspired and remain kind of calm and patient through all of this? And
Mhm.
that's where my other interest, my side interest, my late at night interest is art. And not only collecting art, but also I do it myself, I learn it. So I think that gives me balance. But my
Mhm.
curiosity, my love of people, public service inspires me, and the art gives me a sense of balance and calm and no anxiety. I'm very laid back.
Oh yes, well that's why they talk about the suffering artists, and though it all always does have to be about suffering, but art is a way of
Start.
releasing your emotions, your feelings, um, and it's communication,
Exactly.
because communications is very important. Before we had the language, we had to act things out, and we tell stories through art, because honestly, if we just was looking at data and statistics and that sort of thing, it would be pretty boring and hard to keep our attention. But why don't you talk about some of the ways that art serves as communication for people and for um, groups of for individuals, groups of people, and even in terms of movements.
Well, absolutely in the movement, for sure, art, because even in the environmental way, when we're trying to get people to understand the importance, well, you take statistics. I mean, what's more interesting to just hear the numbers, or actually to be able to describe and see the faces and hear the stories of those that these numbers impact? When you're
Mhm,
talking about, we're going through extreme heat period now, the weather. I mean, it's like anything. There, we can say, well, we have these many people that's hit. It's a record number. This is what's happening with the heat. But when you show the impact that this extreme weather has, when they see the picture, there's still
mhm,
so much truth to the fact that one picture is worth 1,000 words, and the impact is far more. It just hits people, and they understand it, and they see it, and often
mhm.
can understand. Well, that could be me, and sometimes that's what moves people. When you think of the Civil Rights March, the Voting Rights Act, what's the first visual that comes to your mind? Well, John Lewis and them in Selma, Alabama, with the dogs and being beat.
Mhm.
That,
Yeah,
you unless we saw it's when people saw that on their television screens back then, come up and actually see that the police had released the dogs, they were beating them, crossing the bridge, and they were just peacefully marching. That made a difference. So photography, and that's something what I think, one photograph can tell the stories, or what we've been writing when you go forward before Congress to testify on why you want, the Voting Rights Act. That one image can express so much, and people can see it and feel it. And also they can believe it, they more so than he's saying, well, this happened and da 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 da. And so when it,
mhm.
not only the still picture, but when they saw it on television, you heard the people screaming. I mean, that's where the movement moved on to the next level, and people had a change of heart. A lot of people. It's not always every,
Mhm.
but a lot of people have it. So that's where it can help push a movement forward. But also, more recently with when that image, that one now in the with cell phones, with George Floyd, the little young
Yeah,
woman who took that picture. That when that hit, I mean that you know one can say I can't breathe, but when you actually see it,
yeah.
that's impactful as millions of us marching. So that's what I call the power of the image. And some people can do it beautifully in writing. And one of our dear friends, Mustafa Santiago Ali, does it beautifully. And I have a beautiful
Yeah.
poem that talks to that if you that I can read if you want to hear it. And we can.
Yes, please share your
So,
art.
so this one is one called the Justice Whisperer. And of course, for those who don't know, Mustafa Santiago Ali is kind of foremost that we all work with in terms of environmental justice that's on the airways, and I guess in his free time, and I don't know when he gets it, he's able to put into words what so many of us are feeling, but also that pushes us to do more. So this is called the Justice Whisper, and it opens up, and I'll do my justice of reading it. In the barren fields of apathy, where shadows loom, I sow seeds of defiance in the quiet of gloom. Creativity, my chisel, carves hope from despair, crafting visions of change with tender, loving care. In the echo of silence, where voices fade, I paint murals of justice on walls decayed. Environmental hymns flow from my pen's decree, a sympathy of green, a ballad of the free. Amidst the storm of doubt, where the dreams retreat, I sculpt monuments of courage from defeat. Social change whispers in the wind's gentle sigh, a revolution ignited beneath a listless sky. For when the world sleeps in a slumber deep, I dance with ideas that refuse to sleep. Inspired by the fire that refuses to wane, um, I rise from the ashes, defying the mundane. In the canvas of chaos where bedlam abides, I weave tapestries of empathy where unity resides. Creativity, my compass, in the darkest of nights, guides me towards dawn where justice ignites. So let the uninspiring times challenge and fray, for from their ashes, new worlds find their way. In the heart of creation, where dreams take flight, we forge tomorrow's path with unwavering might. So, in essence, it's, we all have dreams. Not, we all know Martin Luther King, but those dreams, taking flight. And that is what inspires us, I think, as he says, they come from the ashes to take flight. So um, these are the things that, I guess he expressed that goes through his mind, but, it is that curiosity mixed with the chaos, but also with the dreams of the future. And so
Mm,
that's where I think the arts and the creativity, that's why you always see artists that are associated with social movements. As he said, you see the murals on the walls and also the
mhm.
messages, how they deliver. We all have a way of delivering our messages.
Yeah.
And so and also you have a diversity of people, how they receive messages. Some,
Mhm,
want to read it, detailed information. Some want to see it streaming on video. Some want to see it in movies. So I
mhm.
just think we have to use all because it helps kind of inform all our senses, as human beings and all. And
Yes.
sometimes you can reach people easier through the arts.
Mhm.
So
And art also um affects culture. And I'm thinking back to the days when there was a cultural shift with African Americans. They had gone through being called colored and Negro and other things. And when they made this cultural shift to saying, I'm black and
right.
I'm proud.
James
And
Brown, right?
yeah, and you began to see pictures and carvings of, of black folks, in African settings. And you began to see photographs of women and men with their hair grown out, afros, and wearing dashiki. So it's the other thing is that art can also help shift culture because people saw men with dashikis, women with African dresses on and headdress, and they were inspired to learn their culture and even change the way they dress sometimes. And so and and art can have political messages and it can have cultural messages, right?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you look at our writers, how our messages are carried on, whether it was James Baldwin or Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? I mean, the impact that has on people telling us
Mm-hmm,
history, even when people want to erase the history. But you know, you go from the literature of whether it's poetry to music, because that also delivers a message too. Because you know, you have to deliver messages to people where they are and how they want to receive it, and
mm-hmm,
then even rap, the stories that were how messages are delivered that way. So you have all sorts of audiences, and I think it's easier to connect and reach them instead of saying, "Oh, here's a the tough news about extreme heat, blah 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 blah." But if you play Marvin Gaye's song, "What's Going On," you that was then, but how many years ago was that song a hit? And it's still now. I mean,
mm-hmm,
you know what his message he was delivering then still exists and it reverberates now. And people tend to remember, you know, a tune gets stuck in your head, you remember that easier. I mean,
mm-hmm,
sometimes I say people, if they want to learn some facts, put it to music, then they'll, you know, it'll stick with you longer, or draw it. You remember that image far more, that picture far more than anything else. So I think that is a form and the best way, one of the best ways of communicating um, even hardcore, very, very hardcore messages to people. And then you get into the whole advertising, the message of that,
mm-hmm.
how that is used and how it can change people's mind, as you said. You know.
That's exactly where I was gonna go, Flo, because if you're not telling your story, if you're not telling if you're not sharing your message, and especially in a way that's positive and uplifting, other people will tell it for you. And so we even see that in the arts where I remember being in Jordan and several occasions we asked people, when you think of black people in America, what do what comes to mind? And most of them told us Martin Luther King Jr. and New Jack City. So art, if you're not creating your own art to tell your story, then other people will tell your story for you in art, right?
Yeah, because what's that old African phrase? Well, I don't know how old, but I hear it a lot. That
Mm,
until the tiger or lion writes a story, the hunter will always be the
yeah.
author. I mean, we all have to tell our own story, and that is a huge problem here in
Mm-hmm,
the States, where you know trying to erase people's history. But thank
mm-hmm,
goodness their storytelling, you know, from our ancestors, from those of us, you know, the heritage from Africa, was you had the
mm-hmm.
griot. It was by word of mouth. And then
Yeah.
with my relatives in Mississippi, it was porch sitting at night and telling the story and going over all, you know, what happened during the day and who did what and da da da. But that is a form of, you know, it's storytelling, but it is getting your message. Or you know, we used to record everything in Bibles. You know, who was
Mm-hmm,
all the history of us. So in a sense, those Bibles became our history books, and
yeah.
now are in museums. You know, because people necessarily didn't have diaries, so they write down there. The other thing I would say, you know, from funerals, I had a friend that collected all the programs because they said that that's our history, and long before you know, New York Times made an apology for not printing a lot of African Americans, you know, during the after George Floyd, printing a lot about famous Black Americans. They'd never put it in their obituaries. So they've been
Uh,
doing it. Oh, yes. So, you know, to erase one's history because everyone has a history, it's just not always documented.
Mhm.
And so, or it's documented different through music, through word of mouth,
Mhm.
through dance, even because the
Oh yeah.
dancing is a form of storytelling. I mean, I worked on Jelly's Last Jam, a Broadway Tony Award winning play with Gregory, the late Gregory Hines, and it was a story about jazz. So
Mhm.
different ways messages are delivered, but the key is to document it and keep it. And sometimes we have to be getting in terms of our environmental or social context. We have to make sure we have people that deliver our message. So it's uh, documented different points of view because we know if we just depend on the mainstream media, and that's one area I specialize in, working with
Mhm.
the diverse media, the Black press primarily, to help make sure it's got the messages there so people are informed about it. Because
Mhm.
um, there are a lot of misconceptions about environmentalism, as you know.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and you reminded me that before we had printed materials, and even before people were, had handwriting, that you had your griots, you had your storytellers in villages who could remember the village's entire history, and they just would pass those stories down one generation after another, right?
right, without a doubt, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think that's important because everybody does have a history. It's not always documented, and
Mhm.
it has to be corrected. We know here in America that um, um, just because it's not hasn't been documented in mainstream papers does not mean it does not exist. And
Mhm.
uh, that's there's a connection and a continuation, knowing your history and understanding it, and also it gives people a sense of, you know, I just didn't show up. I'm connected to some roots. My life was more than being an enslaved individual. I've
Yeah.
actually farmed, but history had certain circumstances because that's the other thing is kind of correcting history because it is
Mhm.
written by those who had access to the tools and the ability to do it. So a lot
Mhm.
now is important. And also photographs, old photographs. Say, when you see the old photographs of we're all dressed up and sitting there in proper, I mean, I think Frederick
Mhm.
Douglass clearly understood the power of the photograph because he was, other than Mark Twain's the most photographed person of his period, but he felt,
Uh-huh.
I want to be photographed that way to show that we are more than simply enslaved people. We're human.
Mhm.
We have those things. And when you go and see that, see all those pictures, and whether you're going at the Schomburg in New York or even the National Museum of African American History and Culture here, it
Mhm.
you have a greater sense of, I'm more than just what I've seen on the movies, old movies, and
Mhm.
that I haven't seen in my history books. I think
Yeah.
that's what's important too.
Mhm. And writing it, it's sometimes, because when we hear history, we think of documentaries and history books. But another way of communicating is to do it with fiction, with a story that isn't true, but it's a story folks can identify with because perhaps something similar had happened before, or it's something that we could see happening. And so I know you said you work with plays in New York, and so how do you feel about fiction
Oh no,
as
fiction.
a form of storytelling? Is
No,
it sometimes better than telling you know, the actual story?
well, yes, because that's also where you put your creativity. But it also, the great thing about fiction is for those who want to protect the innocent, as they say, sometime you can take a story, but the message that you want to put in there, it is very
Mhm.
be subtly, there how you do the subtle ways with fiction, which is also just like the poetry and the poem that I read. Mustafa wrote it in a way that you can visually see everything. Somebody could say,
Yeah.
well, yeah, another way to write it, well, at night when I go to sleep, I can't, my mind's running, I'm thinking about this and that, so I want to write. But that may not pull you in and help you visualize and really get your attention. So I think what the great thing about fiction is you can subtly, it's a ways and means you can do it. You can subtly tell the story, but you can also entertain in
Mhm.
ways that are different from if you're just reading a newspaper article, and you can give nuance and you can have action in it when it needs to, ways to grasp people attention, but yet you're still
Mhm.
delivering a message. I mean, the book Invisible Man is fiction, but yeah.
Yeah, Ralph Ellison. Yeah.
Exactly. The impact and meaning is just so it makes you go deeper, but people can still relate to it. And you relate to sections and parts of it throughout the story. So, no, fiction's an invaluable tool. And,
Mhm.
James Baldwin, most of his works, um, Toni Morrison, is fiction.
Mhm.
But whether it's serious fiction that really pulled to Octavia Butler is one that I truly love. I mean,
Mhm.
she does sci-fi, but she makes sure that we as African Americans are part of that whole sci-fi realm. So
Mhm. And I just was going to point out sci-fi, science fiction, because a lot of times you read something that's fiction, but it also is based on, reality that has not fully um, blossomed and flourished. And then a few years later, you're like, wow, this thing I read about in this fiction, no book, is now reality. You know what I mean?
1984, right? Yeah,
Oh, yes, 1984, George Orwell.
right.
And
Mhm.
mm, so, so what can we say to people who just think that they can't write or they're afraid to write? How important is it just to start the creativity, even if you're just journaling, if you're just writing down in a book what happened to you during your day, how you felt, that sort of thing. It's
I'll give you two examples. First, we live in a new world, so we have the world of technology. So,
mm,
so it's kind of like there are many sources that can be your private editor. That you can,
mm,
if you misspell something, they can correct it. And I'm
yeah.
so, I'm one that, I embrace technology. I 2 years ago sat down late at night, and every night I teach myself how to do AI because I draw regular drawing, but I was determined to learn that, and I have. And
Mm,
like anything, there's a good and the bad, but if you put it to good use, it's okay. There's still the argument of um, uh, fake images and things like that, and they're using tools to overcome it. But I mean, if anybody now more than ever, you don't have to be afraid of writing down a final piece of work. No, even the
mm,
greatest writers don't like write it and it's beautiful the first time. It goes over and over and over again. And I will say, because I did my first job was for a major publishing company, Houghton Mifflin, and Ernest Hemingway was one of their writers. He was an author that they published, and I did not realize until they published a book of all his unedited work. So this guy couldn't spell, he couldn't put commas. I was like, wow. But but he knew what he wanted to express. And how he was saved was a guy named Max Perkins, who was his author. And he came in and he could, just make it flow. And so
mm,
that in essence how I say with some people today, they're different technologies that can be like your editor. And even
Mm-hmm.
all magazines, all newspapers, they have editors, and even you, me, we want somebody else. Can you take a second look? Does this make
Oh
sense?
yeah.
Instead,
Mm-hmm.
because so don't be afraid not to put down what you think. Even when you know you're young, you say, see cat go. I mean, that's the
Mm-hmm.
start, but it's something you're expressing what you see. And I know so many people are afraid of writing, and don't be afraid. Now one shouldn't, because you can. There are ways to get it corrected, and you can always ask other people to help you out. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it is important to document your thoughts now. Journaling, and I don't. And journaling doesn't. You don't just have to write it. You can now with phones talk it into record it, uh,
Mm-hmm.
video. There's visual storytelling. So, but I think and that's how I use the arts, and how everyone I think can during times that are unsettling or chaotic. They say we
Mm-hmm.
live in a high anxiety time. So how do you back away and get that relief? Is it through music, through dance? That's all the arts. And I think that
Yeah.
is one of the reasons we have survived what we've gone through, because
Mm-hmm.
we have entertained ourselves at the end of the day after all the stress, whether
Yeah.
it's, leaning on the faith and the gospel song on Sunday morning in church, or whether they
Mm-hmm.
around it's a release. It's a
But
chance. Yeah.
in the church on Sunday or in the club on Saturday, saying the roof, the roof is on fire, but releasing
Oh, there you
tension
go.
and stress, right?
There we go. So that is really the importance of arts. It gives you, inspires it sparks creativity. It also sparks you thinking outside of the box to solve, new ways to solve old problems. I mean, when,
Mm-hmm.
when you really look at the whole civil rights movement, it was well strategically thought out, and the creativity, you notice how everyone had suit and ties, how you dressed a certain way,
Oh
because
yeah.
there was a reason to that. But
Mm-hmm.
that was delivering the message by visual message, by the look. Everyone was dressed
Yeah.
up. I was like, when they were doing that march on Washington, oh, they must have been hot. But they
Yeah.
were trying to send a visual message. And so we
The
can,
visual message of we are good, decent, outstanding citizens,
right,
right? Mm-hmm. And not dressing
counter,
like
yeah,
thugs or yeah. Mm-hmm.
counter the messages that other messengers will deliver that don't really know you, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's why we're always now still, you know, uh, having our museums, and even throughout the country, more museums are now including Black artists that have always existed. I mean, you had one of the
Mm-hmm.
most famous ones that came from South Carolina, um, 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 there that people are still learning about. But
Mm-hmm.
that's the other reason why I do the arts. When you do stressful work, there are
Mm-hmm.
ways you want relief. I mean, I love movies. I have a lot of friends, that are actors and actresses, and the friendship between Muhammad Ali and Howard Bingham, who was his best friend, and Howard was one of my best friends, was
Mm-hmm.
Howard would photograph him. And if you see some of the images of Muhammad Ali, Howard did them, and Howard also from Mississippi.
Uh-huh.
But to see those images, and that was in a sense part of, Howard's kind of way of relaxing. And he was telling the visual story because, the world had done one story about Muhammad Ali, but he
Mm-hmm.
other story, when you see a pic, that makes a difference. So,
Mm-hmm.
there's many ways that people can tell their stories, get their messages out, whether it's about environmental justice or police brutality.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And you're an artist and you express yourself using several ways. So what are some of the what are some of the different types of art? I know you write and then you do visual art as well, right?
I've always had my camera with me, and that whole, harkens back. Well, maybe it's been through generation. My grandmother, who just celebrated a birthday, she's my late grandmother. She had a camera, and I have her old camera. And my father was a photographer, and even being in the military, I think that was his release from stress because
Uh-huh.
did 2 tours of service in Vietnam, but he had his camera, and in the pictures that we could see one thing, we were little watching on TV of Vietnam and the war, which is the worst. But then his pictures were of the humanity of people, that these were real people. There were people and children and
Hmm.
countryside. So, and I guess he took his photograph as a sense of relief, also, relief, and for him to, look at both sides of things. Photography flowed through my, I guess, veins. But I also do silk screen, which I take the photograph and have a picture. I do have one on the wall I can show you. Those in the background are all those that I buy and collect because some of my
Yeah.
friends are, I grew up with a lot of friends that were artists, and I was
Mhm.
one working the jobs, but I'd have money to buy and help support my starving artists. They're not only visual artists, but they're actors, Richard Gant, Alfred,
Mhm.
things like that. Support, I would, buy tickets, go to their plays and things like that. And then I'd start collecting. But, being in proximity to them, I'd learn how to do this, silk screen or different sort of paintings. And
Mhm.
most of my work are people that I do because I want it to be known we are seen, like we are here, we've been here, we will be here. No matter beyond
Mhm.
whatever portrayal in mainstream newspapers or on TV, that we are more than just what some others have kind of portrayed us as being. We have a full life and we should be seen. So,
Absolutely, yeah. And so now you paint what you do, you paint, you use
I
what,
paint, I use
acrylic?
acrylics and I
Mhm.
use watercolor. I don't do oils so much anymore because uh, although they have new oil pieces, but it's longer drying time. Although their colors are richer
Mhm.
colors, I do something called encaustic, which is using wax. I have examples like that. If I could get up and show them.
You use wax instead of
Yeah,
acrylic?
encaustic. I have an example. You can continue to talk. I'll get you a picture. I meant to have it right here. I'll bring it, show.
Mhm. Okay.
Um,
Well, yeah. Because I use acrylic and like you, I just don't have the
a
patience.
piece of my encaustic work.
Oh, okay.
And it's called When I Was Young. So it's wax. And I
Beautiful. And
love
it's
anything.
all
I'm a
wax.
colorist, so I love brilliant colors. And so
Mhm.
it's like the house over here, and the little girl with the two braids. I had two braids. It's not me, but and then tic tac
Mhm.
toe, and mom is written up here at the top. So it's
Yeah.
all done with wax here,
Mhm.
just a
And the
different.
wax and the wax is colored already.
Yeah, different colors of wax. Yeah, that you put
Wow.
in different places and things like that. So yeah, this is
I'll
an
have to see if
example.
I can try that.
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, anything can be tried, and then with silk screen, it's just you can take any picture, even if you didn't do it, and it's just a layering method of layering it on and things like that with silk screen. So you
Mhm.
know, then you can also start, just basic. Some people, I can't draw. I said, well, there's abstract art, which is what that piece is back there. You can do circles, you can do squares and start painting in there or do anything. At least try.
Mhm.
It's fun to just, do that to as a form of relaxation, stuff like that. You know.
Yeah. And going back a little bit about telling your story, and how things somehow just get, I'll say, sort of taken out of context. because like when hip hop first came out, Curtis Blow and others, it was positive. It was, um, you had songs about hanging out, being with your friends, Will Smith, Fresh Prince, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Summertime, just, having fun, out barbecuing. And then somehow or another, the music switched up, and it began to glorify drugs and degrading women and that sort of thing. So there's sort of been a history of that too, hasn't there?
Now, I guess, there's always been all sorts of voices that we,
Hmm.
and then the times, uh, you know, they say the blues started talking about my baby left me and that, in,
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think they all have told a story. It's just
Hmm.
kind of the words that they've used and the language they've used and the beats to tell the story have changed up over time. And
Hmm.
um, and also the audience listening taste and style has changed over time. It's kind of like even when you look at um, civil rights marching, they don't wear the suit and ties and all that anymore. So one thing
No.
that change, is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's constant.
Hmm.
But like John Lewis, we're striving for good change. You want
Uh-huh.
change. So with the stories, with the music nowadays, no matter how one gets their music, they have
Hmm.
the X version. They have two versions because
Oh yeah.
that has to do with making money.
Yeah. The
Okay,
audience.
you can't play some versions on the radio. Regard
Mhm.
and your audience
You want the money from both sides, right?
want the money because there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of competition,
Mhm.
and the Mores, they were, in the 50s, 60s, it was totally different. But some of the things that the musicians face, whether it's Billie Holiday, has not changed. Even Ray Charles, some of that they,
Mhm.
whatever they face. But it's also how they tell their story. How, I think that has changed. How
Mhm.
people tell story. The songs, in many ways, are still telling a story. You
Oh yeah,
know.
absolutely. And then also the way people use their art,
Yes.
portray the characters. But you notice that, for example, one of the things about actress like Cecily Tyson or Alfie Woodard that I respect is because it's like, hey, they're not going to portray certain negative characters. They're not going to, take off their clothes. You know what I mean? But still, they portray these really powerful and positive images. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, and I also think that it's also you need we've got a lot of stories. We need good writers. You need the writers to tell the stories, which I think is good. And we probably need more diverse producers to directors to and backers to back the put up the funds to make sure the stories can be told because you hear often in Hollywood that well our story why is it the same story they always want to tell and that's what you want to we need that's why you always will need the storytellers there because some people that's the only way they're going to understand and get their news about anything is through how
Mhm.
it's delivered to them in fiction. They probably won't read a history book, but if you can portray some of that history. So I think all forms of communications are good. And whether you're using it, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I think the key is that we document our histories, our views on
Mhm.
certain topics, and also make sure people and help people stay informed and to understand because we need those that'll give the facts and deliver it from a perspective that includes all of us that are impacted. And I'm getting back to the environmental when we do, community relations or environmental PR about the environment. We
mhm,
have the diverse activists up there telling the story of how it impacts
mhm,
people hit, excuse me, by
mhm,
it's important.
mhm. Yeah, you also do quite a bit of nonfiction writing. I
Right.
guess,
Op-eds,
yeah.
press
So,
releases.
so
Um,
that's different than fiction. That's telling the story in another way, right?
exactly. But some of the tools you need the same. I mean, a press release, you could say this happened on this day at this time. But if
Mm,
you do it in a op-ed, you want to get a message across, you want to have that opening, you want to still tell a story and weave the facts in, because what you're trying to get people is to understand why you've got to do certain environmental changes, whether it has
mhm,
impact on maternal health, what's the cause and effect of doing, fossil fuel and why you
mhm,
have to do it. And then, with the op-ed, then you wrap up with, okay, here's the call to action. Here's what you can do. Here's what we can do collectively. Part of it is we don't have to settle for any situation. We can all change it. And that's what I think a lot of these with op-eds are, particularly ones that you do and where we place them, is that we can all do something, but people need to
mhm.
know how, and be informed of why, the impact and who things are going to impact. And that's where the compelling storytelling um, um,
Mhm.
happens. And, whether it's a
Yeah.
op-ed or a press release or having an article written um,
Mhm.
in a
So,
publication.
so everyone should, if not individually, they should be connected with someone who can write, who can tell the story. If something is going on in their community that isn't right, write an op-ed to the newspaper. Write
Everybody.
it.
Yes,
Mm,
absolutely. Just put down your thoughts. Don't worry about is it right or is wrong. And then, you can definitely find somebody
mm,
to help you, or there's so many resources, like I said, online now, you know,
mhm.
Grammarly to AI that can help correct it for you, and
Yeah.
right. And then get it out there. Send it to your local paper or your local radio station or TV station, even. Yeah, anybody can. People that text. You can text a weather person. You can
Mhm.
text a news anchor. The young,
Mhm.
I can't remember her name, who happened to be there and got the videotape of George Floyd. She wasn't about, I'm a reporter. It wasn't about that. It was,
Yeah.
she captured the moment, so
Mhm.
anybody can do that,
Yeah.
get it to folks. And that's why I think that's, we can all be citizen journalists, especially
Mhm.
now with, this cell phone that
Yeah.
everybody,
I was gonna say a lot of people use social media platforms as a way of getting their art out now.
they do.
But one of the things that concern me is that, and it's the same thing in the print media. You know what I mean? Because journalists say things like, "If it bleeds, it leads,"
Yeah.
and it's just how it appears that what's controversial is what draws people's attention so often.
Yeah, unfortunately, it does. People, they see the fire and run to where the alarm is. They always want to see what's going on, and also
Hmm.
that is a sad thing. That's why we still need people that will, fact check and check. And you see, you know, it, uh, it's funny because I say in social media there are different spaces for different things. Instagram, you see a lot of the artists on there because it's highly
Hmm.
visual. uh, TikTok
Yeah.
is a video that is new that people put up there, but you also I always say you got to check 3 or 4 sources for the information that fact checked it before you
Mhm,
through. And some of the images are, you know, they're fake. So you got to be careful with that. Don't just go with
mhm,
everything you read there. It's like everything. Be cautious about it. Check it. I tell people
mhm,
always check 3 or 4, sources before you go with it.
yeah,
I think that's important.
mhm. Well, Flo, we've run out of time.
Ah,
Yes,
fantastic. Well, this has
but
been different. I didn't talk politics. I didn't talk.
well, we'll have to do that with another show. But I would love sometime because occasionally we do art showings. And when we do our next one, it would be great if you could have some of your pieces. Okay?
Oh, without a doubt, I don't mind. I don't push it out as much because of other things, but I have a lot. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you once again, brothers and sisters, friends and frenemies. And thank you for listening to the Leo and Larry show. And Flo McAfee has been a wonderful guest. Flo, will you tell people how they can reach you?
Yes, well, they can reach me at Flo at summerlandstudio.com. That's how you can send a note there. And then my full name is where I have an art website. It's Floydetta, FLOYDETTA, McAfee, MCAFEE.com. And you can see some of my works from photography, from Africa to all over, for that. And some of the stuff that I do.
And thank you so much. And then also, if you want to reach me, Reverend Leo Whitbury, you can go to info@newalphacdc.com or go to our website, newalphacdc.com. And don't forget that you can always reach me at the court at the church where I'm blessed to pastor, Kingdom Living Temple, 705 South Irby Street, in the Magic City of Florence, South Carolina. 843-799-0740. And so until next week, this time, always remember if there are things that you need to know and places where you want to go, then connect with the Leo and Larry show. Stay blessed. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.